ओम सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिना सर्वे सन्तु निरामय सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्. So with these beautiful words, wishing everyone a wonderful life, wonderful health, let us move to our usual talk. Welcome once again to everyone on Saturday morning. So we will continue on the topic of astronomy and mathematics. In the last session, we, dealt with little bit about Aryabhatta and his writings. Today we will deal with some other great astronomers and mathematicians of ancient India. As you know, I'm not a mathematician, so I won't be able to give you, the technical details, but I will give you some idea how they wrote and what they wrote. But before we go into that, I wanted to start today's talk with something called knowledge and development. You see, we presume today that as the world grows, you accumulate more knowledge, and therefore we are more knowledgeable today than what our ancestors were before. That is one misnomer. It may be true partially, but it is not entirely true. That is one. We will discuss that briefly. And secondly, the definition of development, that as you grow in time, as you accumulate more knowledge, perhaps you are more developed. Now, both of these contentions which we have in today's world are actually question marks. So this is what I would like to briefly tell before we start. You see, knowledge appears and disappears. What is known today may not be known tomorrow, and what was known yesterday perhaps is not known today. Like those people who constructed pyramids and temples, those pyramids and temples, that knowledge is not available today, though it existed several thousand years back in time. And the knowledge which we have of so-called high-rise buildings, we can construct a 200-story building. Now that knowledge perhaps may not have been available in the past. So the knowledge also has its fluctuating time frame. Things which are available today were not available in the past, or may not have been available in the past, and may be available in the future. So we cannot for precise say that we are more developed than what our ancestors were. For example, the knowledge of Ayurvedic science. It was so great in the ancient time, even in my own childhood. I knew people who knew all the herbs. They knew their properties and they could make preparations at home without any problem. Now that knowledge has completely disappeared. I don't see that knowledge anywhere in the households anymore. You don't even see those shops of pansaris where all these herbs used to be sold. And people don't know what herb is what. If you put people in front of somebody, they won't know what is people. Or you ask somebody how the long looks like, they won't be able to tell you, many of them. So the old, knowledge of various sciences, with time that knowledge disappears and new avenues of knowledge appear. For example, the knowledge of computer technology was not available 100 years back in time and may not be available after 100 or 200 years from today. So these changes are natural processes in the civilizational journey of humanity. One type of knowledge comes and then that disappears. Another variety of knowledge comes, then that disappears, then another variety comes. So it is not necessarily a journey towards enhancing knowledge more and more. It is also a journey of forgetting and developing something new. So this is one point which must be very clear to us, when people talk that we are far more developed today than our ancestors were, I think that is completely misnomer. Our ancestors had a different variety of knowledge, and we have a different variety of knowledge. So the comparison between the two is not necessarily possible and not necessarily relevant as well. Let me give you another example. There were no eating system, for example, in Europe or in the cold countries 100 years back in time. People used to live in those minus 30 degree, minus 20 degree temperatures without heating. They used to live a life without those kind of facilities. Look at their, body structure, how strong it was that it could withstand those temperatures. Today, if you remove the heating system in Europe, in the middle of winter season, when the temperatures are say minus 25, minus 30, people will freeze to death, which did not happen in the ancient time because they had a different system of the body which developed, which got accustomed to a different kind of living. So things keep changing with time, but they are not necessarily better today. That is what I wanted to say. It is all relative, it's all comparative based on the circumstances of those days and the conditions prevailing at that time. So this is one point which we must keep in mind when we talk about ancient knowledge. Now, the ancient knowledge which our ancestors gave in mathematics and astronomy, that knowledge is not relative in that sense. That knowledge is fundamental because these parameters do not change. The distance between sun and moon and the movement of the sun or the movement of the earth, they do not change overnight. Maybe they change, but they change perhaps in a different time span that could be billions and trillions of years, but not in our time span, which is say a few thousand years. So those changes are not occurring. That knowledge is basically fundamental for us. But other types of knowledge could be transient. One disappears, something else appears. So that difference we should keep in mind. The one thing which does not change is mathematics. Because mathematics is irrelevant, or you can say is not impacted by the time, not by the circumstances either. 2 and 2 will make 4, whether it was 10,000 years back in time or whether it is 5,000 years from today. So mathematical knowledge and the knowledge of astronomy are more fundamental in that sense. So this is the point I wanted to make to understand the what you call relativity of knowledge. That ancient knowledge may not be relevant today, but that was a knowledge in a different domain altogether. We have lost that knowledge. We have some new branches of knowledge today, which may be lost tomorrow. And this journey will continue, but there are fundamentals of knowledge, which is mathematics and which is the astronomy, they will continue. So now let us go back to our talk on astronomy and mathematics. I will take some other great mathematicians and astronomers of ancient India today. So I'll start with a person called Budayan. Budayan was actually, his journey in life began 800 years before Christ. That is called BCE, before Christian era. 800 years before Christian era, and he died in 740 BCE. So he lived 60 years of life in that ancient time. That is approximately 2,900 years from today, back in time. Now he wrote a book which is called Salva Sutra, S-U-L-V-A, Sulva Sutra or Salva Sutra, I cannot say how it is pronounced in Sanskrit, but that is the name of his book which he wrote that time. And this book is available. Now here I want to make one more point, that we know only certain books of these writers. Like Aryabhatiya wrote 4 volumes, 4 different books, but we only know Aryabhatiya. We don't know other books of Aryabhat. So similarly, Budayan must have written many other books, but the book which is known today and which is available today in the form of text is called Sulva Sutra. Now, Sulva Sutra actually deals with the Pythagoras theorem. Now, people think that the Pythagoras theorem was given by Greeks, but this man, lived much before Pythagoras in terms of life, and he wrote about Pythagoras theorem in that time in his book, which was written, almost 3,000 years back in time. And this Sulva Sutra has 6 parts. The book has been divided into 6 parts or 6 chapters or 6 skandhas, whatever you call them. The first is called Sotsura. The second is called Karmansura. The third is called Veda Sutra. And fourth is called Graha Sutra. Actually 6 parts. The next one is called Dharma Sutra. And the last one is called Sulva Sutra. So these are the 6 parts of this book which deal with different aspects of astronomy and mathematics. They also deal with Dharma, because there is one particular chapter or part dedicated to Dharma Sutra. Then they have Graha Sutra. Graha means the planetary system. Graha Sutra is entire planetary system deals with that. So you can see they were dealing with different kind of systems, mathematical and astronomical in those days. Now I will like to read out the translation of one of his verses, which actually is a reproduction, practical reproduction of Pythagoras theorem. The Sanskrit verse is given here, but I will read the English translation of it. A rope stretched along the length of a diagonal produces an area which the vertical and horizontal sides make together. Now this is practically what Pythagoras told us. And this is what is written in the Sanskrit verse in this Sulva Sutra. In Sulva Sutra, the 6th part, that is Sulva Sutra. The six parts, the Sulva Sutra has 6 parts called Sulva Sutra. In that, this particular Sanskrit verse appears, which tells you everything about, these mathematical principles. Let me read out one more here, which is actually also related to the same principle but goes beyond that. It says that the chord which is stretched across a square, produces an area double the size of the original square. Now, this is another mathematical principle which has been expressed in this Sanskrit verse. Then Budayana also deals with how you compare the circle with a square. This is all geometry, how you calculate the area and the circumference of a circle. Similarly, how you calculate the area and the periphery of a square. So here he writes like this. The English version of that verse is: draw half its diagonal about the center towards the east-west line. Then describe a circle together with a third part of that which lies outside the square. Now, this is what he has explained in his theorem. So these are, just a few examples. As you know, I'm not a mathematician. I do not know the intricacies of these mathematical theorems. But as a layman, as just a basic knowledge of mathematics, I can tell you that what has been described in these verses is actually phenomenal. Unfortunately, all these have been overlooked because the Western people wrote the civilization and the knowledge according to their understanding and their scriptures. They did not take into account what was written in India or China at that time. So in that sense, the history books which are produced in the West and which are now taught in India are incomplete, and actually I would say they give a very wrong impression of the history of different subjects, including mathematics. So Budayana was one of the first astronomer and mathematician known to us in terms of history in India. I'm sure there must have been before him, but this is what the historical knowledge tells us. And as I mentioned, he was born in 800 before Christian era, and he died in 740 before Christian era, 60 years of his life. Now we will go a little bit more in Aryabhatta. Aryabhatta, as you know, he has mentioned in Aryabhatya. In one of the verse, he has mentioned the year of his birth, that he was 37 years old or that time, that particular time. So his birth actually has been calculated precisely. That is 475 AD or CE in the Christian era. And he died in 550. So he lived 75 years of life, and he lived from 475 to 550 Christian era. Now, we talked about Aryabhatya in our last session. Aryabhatya has been divided into 4 chapters. The first chapter is called Gitika Pada. Gitika Pada only has 13 verses, only 13 verses. In those 13 verses, he has described so much knowledge. I have that text with me on the laptop. It's amazing the way he has described so many aspects of mathematics in these 13 verses alone. The total text of Aryabhatya is 121 verses, only 121 verses. So in the first 13 verses of Gitika Pada, he describes the cosmic spirit. That is, he talks about the Brahma first. They pay tribute to the Brahma. And then he describes the alphabetical numbers, which we talked last time, how he has written all the numericals into alphabets. And then he talks about unit of measurement of time, how you measure the time, and calculation of Earth's rotation, how you calculate the rotation of the Earth on its own axis. So this is what he has described there in these 13 verses. And he has calculated the Yuga cycle and length of Mahayuga at 4.32 million years. That is the length of Mahayuga. But 1000 Mahayuga make one Yuga. And that is actually Kalp, one Kalp. And that is 4.32 billion years. That is one day of Brahma. But we will talk about those measurements separately. But Aryabhatta also mentions this measurement of length of Yuga and length of Mahayuga. Mahayuga is a complete cycle of 4 Yugas. You know 4 Yugas? That is Kali Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Sat Yuga. Kali Yuga is the smallest. And then double the size is Dwapar, then triple the size is Treta, and 4 times is Satyug. So it makes actually 10 times of Kali Yuga's length. If you calculate all the 4 Yugas, the length of the 4 Yugas is 10 times that of Kali Yuga. And then 10 cycles of Yugas make one Mahayuga. So Mahayug is basically, you can say 100 times that of the size of Kali Yuga. And then that Mahayuga only represents 10 cycles. 10 cycles. Sorry, 1000 cycles. I'm sorry, 1000 cycles. Mahayuga represents 1000 cycles of 4 yugas. And then one day of Brahma, that is called Yug or Kalp, that is called Kalp. That Kalp actually represents 1 million cycles of Mahayugas. So it actually becomes 4.32 billion years. I might have made some mistake in explaining this, so I will go back again. There are 4 yugas, that is Kali Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Sat Yuga. Kali Yuga is the smallest, Dwapar is twice the size of Kali Yuga, Treta is thrice the size, and Sat Yuga is the 4 times the cycle, 4 times the size of Kali Yuga. So this is one cycle of Yuga. And then 1000 cycle of Yugas is called Mahayuga. And then a Kalp is actually 1 day of Brahma, which is 1000 cycles of 1000 Yugas. So this is how it reads. So 4.32 billion years is the Kalp, which is the length of 1 day of Brahma. We will go into greater detail on this calculation later on. So this is about the first part called Gitika Pada of Aryabhatiya. The second part is called Ganit Pada. That is the mathematics, Ganit Pada. It has 33 verses. And in this, Aryabhatta describes geometrical principles, arithmetic progressions, quadratic equations, indeterminate equations, and tables of signs. These are the descriptions in the Ganit Pada, which has 33 verses in Aryabhatiya. Then there is a Kal Kriya Pada. Kal Kriya is basically time. Kal is time, how the time functions. So that has the third part of Aryabhatiya, Kal Kriya Pada, has 25 verses. And in this, he describes the days, the months, the year, according to the movement of the celestial body. So he links astronomy and time here. The time is linked to the astronomy, how the bodies in the, in the cosmic way they move, and how we calculate them in the form of days and months and years. Then he talks about planetary positions on a particular given day, how the planetary positions change. And that is the science behind the Panchang. The Panchang which we used to have in ancient days, we even now have, some people have that Panchang. That Panchang is based on these planetary positions of the day and how those planetary positions keep changing. Then he goes into how the excess month, to adjust the solar month, the lunar month into solar year. There's a system in Panchang. Every 3 years you have an extra month, which is called Adhik Mas. So that extra month, how that is calculated, has been explained in Kala Kriya Pada of Aryabhatiya. Then he talks about the names and number of days in a week, which we were talking about, how these names have been created by linking each of the day with a particular planet in the solar system, 7 planets and 7 days, and how they have converted into other languages of the world. So this is what he has talked about in Kala Kriya Pada. Then there's a last part of his Aryabhatiya is Gol Pada. Gol is sphere, basically goal. What is goal? It has 50 verses, 50. And Aryabhatiya here describes various, planets, their interrelationship, their positions, and how they revolve, how they rotate. All that has been described in this portion in great detail. So he talks about the relationship between the Earth and other planets in the solar system. Then how the Earth rotates on its axis. He also talks about trigonometry principles. He also talks about motions of other planets. Then he talks about geospatial computations and eclipsage, the solar and the lunar eclipsage, how they take place, and how the day and nights are caused. All these, including the zodiac signs, the 12 zodiac signs, he has explained in this Golpada. So Golpada is basically the functioning of the cosmic, different planetary systems, which has been explained here. So this is one part of Aryabhatiya. Then we talked about the zero, because he gave place value, that you have 1 and you add 0, it becomes 10, and then another 0, it becomes 100, and next 0. So he has given those calculations in that table, which is called Ekam. Then Dasam, Dasam is with 1 0. Then Shatam, that is with 2 zeros. Then Shastram, that is with 3 zeros, 1000. Then Ayuta, that is with 4 zeros, 10,000. Niyuta, that is with 5 zeros. Then Pratyuta with 6 zeros, with Koti with 7 zeros. Then Arbuda with 8 zeros, Varunda with 9 zeros. Like that he continues, and it gives you a complete, what you call numbers in mathematics. Then he talks about the value of pi. He has given value of pi in Ganit Pada up to 4 digits. And that has been explained in one of his verses. The English translation of that verse is like this: add 4 to 100, multiply by 8, and then add 62,000. The result is approximately the circumference of a circle whose diameter is 20,000. By this rule, he explains the ratio of the circumference to diameter, which is called pi. And he calculated the value of pi at that time as 3.1416, which is exactly the same today, except that they have added more digits after, the point. So this is what Aryabhatiya told that time. Then area of circle. He has calculated that as well, how to calculate the area of circle. Half of the circumference, when multiplied by half of the diameter, exactly gives the area of the circle. See? So beautiful. This is absolutely correct principle which we used to learn when we were child in school. Then he gives about sine function, that sine theta, trigonometry, algebra, and all that. And then he talks about, of course, astronomy, which we discussed in our last session. So this is about Aryabhatiya a little bit more. Now let us go to another great astronomer and mathematician called Varahamihira. Now Varahamihira actually lived soon after Aryabhatta. He lived in 505 to 587 Christian era. That is 505 to 587. That is 82 years of his life he lived. And Varahamihira, his life is not very well known. Very little is known about his writings and all that. But there is one text which is called Brihat Samahita. B-R-I-H-A-T. Brihat Samahita. Brihat Samahita. That is known, and that text is available. In addition, he wrote another which is called Panch Siddhantika. That is 5 principles. So these 2 texts are known to us. These texts are available in writing in today's world. So these are known to us, written by Varahamihira. He was actually a great disciple of Aryabhatta. He went to Ujjain and he found that Aryabhatta has contributed so much. So he got fascinated, and he also went to Ujjain, because Ujjain was the center of science and mathematics in ancient India. And all the great scientists, you will see their journey, somewhere it will end up in Ujjain, because that was the center of mathematics, astronomy, and sciences that time. So this gentleman, Varahamihira, he was, he wrote about, in his book Brihat Samhita, he wrote about architecture, about mathematics, about gemology. Gemology, we have these stones and we connect them with a particular planet and people wear those stones. That is called gemology. So that gemology, he wrote about that. He wrote about the temple architecture. He wrote about planetary motions. And then he wrote about cloud formation, eclipses and timekeeping, seasons and agriculture. So his area of writing is very vast. He has covered so many subjects apart from astrology and mathematics. He has gone into the areas of, for example, agriculture, rainfall, seasons, temples, gemology, which are very different subjects compared to mathematics and astronomy. And his another book, which is Panch Siddhantika, it is actually supposed to have been written in 575 Christian era. And this particular book has collection of astronomical knowledge from Greeks, from Egyptians, from Romans, and from Indian astrology. So that is why it is called Panch, because it has knowledge from 5 different sources. That is the Greek, Egyptian, Roman, Indian, and I think there must be one more which is missing here. So these are the 5 sources from where he collected astronomical knowledge. And that is why this is called Panch Siddhantika, particularly on astronomy. So Varaha Mihira is one of the great writers. Unfortunately, apart from these 2 big books, we do not know much about his writings. But these 2 books contain a lot. He defined the algebraic property of zero. He came out first with zero and negative numbers. Zero was already invented, but it was not invented in terms of zero as a number. It was invented zero in terms of place value. That is how it was. But then during the time of Varaha Mihira, it was actually, and then subsequently we will go to Brahmagupta. During this time of Varaha Mihira and Brahmagupta, the zero was actually converted into a number, like 1, 2, 3, 0 became a number. And similarly, the negative numbers also started coming in. This is the first time when the negative numbers came in. So that negative number and positive numbers beginning was done by Varaha Mihira. And then, there's a thing called Pascal's triangle. I don't know what it means because I don't know this Pascal's triangle myself. But he discovered that triangle way back. The Pascal's triangle in Western world is a recent thing. But Varaha Mihira wrote about this, almost 1,700 years back in time. And that is what has been described in his one of his verses in Brihat Samhita. So basically, this is about Varaha Mihira briefly. Then Brahmagupta. Now Brahmagupta was, you can say, one of the greatest mathematicians like Aryabhatta of all times. He was more recent because he came in the 598 to 668 Christian era. So his time is about 1500 years back. So the memories are, fresh. And he wrote a very big, book with 25 different chapters called Brahma Sputa Siddhanta. Brahma Sputa Siddhanta is the title of his book, which has 25 chapters and which has detailed mathematical calculations. If you talk to somebody who knows mathematics, he will tell you how complicated equations have been explained in this particular book of 25 chapters. Now, during the time of Brahmagupta, there was Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur. They were ruling in Baghdad. They were having what you call Arab Empire in Baghdad. And this gentleman took away his mathematical knowledge, and then he started, propagating this Indian knowledge into Arab world. So that is the first time that the Arab world took Indian mathematics from India to Arab. And from there, it gradually went to Europe later on. So it first went during the time of Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur. That was the time, and that was around 7th, 8th century AD, and it started from Baghdad. So this Brahmagupta's book was taken to this place, and then they propagated this knowledge to the Arab world, and from the Arab world it went to Europe subsequently. And that is why we call the numbers as Indo-Arabic number, because the numbers originated in India, then went to the Arab world, and then went to Europe. Now in Brahmagupta, first time he explained the concept of zero in greater detail. He gave very clear, signals that if you add 0 to 1, it will remain 1. The number will remain unaltered. If you deduct 0 from 1, it will remain unaltered. It still remain 1. If you multiply 0 to 1, it will become 0. And if you reduce, not reduce, if you take the square root of 0, it will remain 0. So the first time he gave very clear concept about 0. Aryabhatta gave the place value from where the 0 started. Varahamihira gave the negative values, and Brahmagupta, and to some extent Varahamihira also, gave a very clear concept of the 0 and how it should be treated as a number in mathematics. So this was one of the great achievements for him. And then Brahmagupta also expanded the concept of negative numbers. He gave very clear theory about negative numbers first time. He said that adding two negative numbers together always results in a negative number. Adding two negatives always becomes a negative. Then subtracting a negative number from a positive number is the same as adding the two numbers. See, this is what we follow today also. Subtracting a negative number from a positive number is the same as adding the two numbers. Then multiplying two negative numbers together is the same as multiplying two positive numbers. The two negative becomes positive. And then dividing a positive number by a negative or a negative number by a positive, the result is negative number. So this very clear-cut principles of how to deal with negatives and positives was actually pronounced by Brahmagupta in his work called Brahma Stupa Siddhanta. And this was very clear pronunciation of the mathematical principles, first about 0 and then about negative numbers. Then he gave very clear, what they call quadratic equations. The quadratic equations and what they call is cyclical quadrilateral. These two principles he pronounced in great detail, which are supposed to be great mathematical, achievements of that time. Most of the people did not know these equations that time. In fact, these equations were discovered by the Western world very recently. So this is how Brahmagupta was one of the what you call great mathematicians of all time, and he consolidated the knowledge of Aryabhatta, Varahamihira, and then added his own knowledge and made a consolidated mathematical book, which was, taken by the Arabs to Arab world and propagated in the Arab world, and from where the knowledge of mathematics went to Europe. Then I will deal with one more great mathematician, which is more recent, that is Bhaskara II or Bhaskaracharya. If you see the satellites launched in it by India, the first was called Aryabhatta and the second was called Bhaskara. The Bhaskara was named after Bhaskaracharya. Bhaskaracharya lived in 1114 to 1185. So 74 years of his life, and which was far recent, about 1000 years back in time. And he was born in Bijapur, Karnataka. And, more details are known about him because his birth is more recent. And he wrote his book called Siddhant Shiromani. That is the title of his book, Siddhant Shiromani, which he wrote at the age of 36. And it has 4 parts. 4 parts. The first part is called Lilavati. That is named after his daughter. And there's a story behind that also, very fascinating story. So that is the book on arithmetic, Lilavati. Then Bij Ganit, that is the second part, that is basically algebra. Then we have Goladhyay. Goladhyay means adhyay on the goal things, that is spherical things. That is the chapter on the spherical things, Goladhyay. And then Graha Ganit, that is the mathematics of planets. So these are the 4 chapters very clearly mentioned. The first chapter, Lilavati, is arithmetic, though is named after his daughter, whose name was Lilavati. So this is how Bhaskaracharya came out with a very clear concept of 4 different things. There is arithmetic, algebra, then the knowledge about geometry, that is Goladhyay, that is on the spherical things, and then Graha Ganit, that the planetary system and their knowledge. He was again at Ujjain because that was the most important place in ancient India for mathematics and astrology. So he was head of the observatory, cosmic observatory in Ujjain. And then actually his knowledge on Lilavati was translated by an Englishman called James Taylor. James Taylor translated Lilavati, which has 277 verses in English. And that translation was done not long ago, about 150 years back. And that actually brought to the world the depth of Lilavati. This particular part of his writing, Siddhant Shiromani, is the main writing, which contains these 4 parts. So the Lilavati contains calculus, progressions, measurement, permutations, and so many other mathematical principles, including geometry. And it is said that Bhaskara's work on calculus predates that of Newton and Leibniz. We know we all talk about Newton and Leibniz, but that knowledge is at least 500 years back, that from Bhaskaracharya. Bhaskaracharya gave that knowledge in the 12th century, while Newton and Leibniz was in 17th, 18th century. So that is the time when these people gave the knowledge of calculus to the Western world, but our mathematicians and astronomers gave this knowledge to us in the 12th century itself. And then he also talked about, zero, the negative numbers. He further consolidated on the knowledge of Brahmagupta. And then he also gave the idea of infinity. That idea came first time that, if you divide a number by 0, then it is infinitive. That idea was given by Bhaskaracharya. If you divide a number by 0, it is infinitive. And then he also gave the value of pi up to 6 digits. That is 3.141666. That is the value he gave in his Bij Ganit section of Siddhant Shiromani. So this is what I thought I will briefly mention about our ancient mathematician and astronomical scientists, whom we call sage or whom we call, whatever, Rishis, they gave this knowledge to the world long, long back. And I'm sure when the human beings will go back in time again, they will find that this knowledge was also mentioned much before then. These people who came in the 8th century BC and 7th century BC, even before that, perhaps all this knowledge must have existed. Because we keep rediscovering knowledge after a gap of time. Some parts of the knowledge disappear and then they reappear at some appropriate time in the future. So this process of discovering and forgetting the knowledge continues, but there's a fundamental difference is that the knowledge of mathematics and astronomy does not change with time, while other knowledge can change with time. The knowledge concerning, for example, engine of a car can change completely with time, but the mathematics and astronomy will not change with time. So that is the difference in that, and that is what I thought we will conclude our chapter on astronomy and mathematics today with our tribute to these 4 or 5 great ancient mathematicians of our great nation, India. So with this, I would like to conclude today's session. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. But I must mention again that I'm not a mathematician and nor am I an astronomer. So I'm not an expert on the subject, but I have some, some knowledge on the basis of my readings of various great writings of India. Thank you.